If you're going to build a custom GPT for your organization or one that you're going to take to the external world, or just one that you're going to use yourself and you're really going to dig into it, one of the most important things you can do from the very beginning is to build a benchmark or a set of metrics to measure how well that custom GPT is doing. Now, if you look around in generative AI, this is something that gets done all the time. Basically, we benchmark the models, we see how well they reason, how well they perform different tasks, the type of tasks that they don't do well on. And we want to think about testing as one of the fundamental things that we do when building a custom GPT. If we don't test, we can't know if we're doing better or worse. It may seem like we're doing better, but in reality, we're actually regressing on all these other things that we really care about. A benchmark is something simple that we can do. Testing is something critically important to make sure that we build custom GPTs that actually help people solve problems as opposed to just creating more problems and headaches for us. The only way to know if we're doing a good job is to create the benchmark and actually measure if we are moving towards a successful generative AI solution. Anytime we change the instructions to our GPT or we change the knowledge base, it can have unexpected effects. And so one of the important things that we want to do when we start building a custom GPT and really thinking about how do we build the best custom GPT, a very important thing to do is to build yourself a simple benchmark. Now, why do you do this? Well, you do this so that as you make changes, you can make sure that it's still reasoning effectively, that it's not regressing in some area and starting to give bad answers to something it used to do well on. But the other reason you want to do it is because you want to make sure that it really is as good as you think it is. And often when we go and sort of ad hoc do this, we may miss areas where we will say, oh, well, it should be able to do this, and we don't actually test it. And then it turns out it doesn't do a very good job of it. So building yourself a benchmark is a really simple thing that you can do to, one, make sure it actually performs well in all the areas that you would like it to perform well, but two, that as you go and modify it and improve it over time, that you don't have some type of regression. Now, there's lots of ways that you can do benchmarking, but I'm going to show you a really simple way. So I've created a simple table here with a number of questions showing the prompt that the user would input, what the expected answer is. Now notice I'm saying expected answer. I'm just trying to provide a simplified description of what we want. Just roughly, is there a right or wrong? Now you could also have examples of great output, like if you go and you play around with it and experiment with it, and you see a really great output, you could capture that and cut it and paste it in as expected answer. Here I've just typed in what the expected answers are, because in these cases there's right and wrong, but I might want to have something that's more about the qualities, something qualitative as opposed to quantitative. But the key is you want to capture examples of what a good output looks like in the document so somebody reading it can interpret it. Then we want to have a rubric. How are we going to grade the output? In many cases, the output is not something that's just, it's not something that we can quantitatively evaluate easily. It's something that a human being is going to have to look at, or we may use GPT-4 in the future to grade itself or to grade other models if we're using some future model. And so we want to spell out exactly what we are looking for in the output. What makes this answer good or bad, and how, if we change that answer in different ways, would we lose points or increase points? And then finally, we want a scoring scale. I like 1 to 10. You could have a scoring scale to 100, however you want to do this. But we want a simple scoring scale so we can look at and see then quantitatively how does the human being who's looking at this think it's performing. Now our goal might be to get all 10s on every answer, but realistically probably what we're going to see is that we're going to get good scores on some things, not as good scores on some things, and we're going to always probably be dealing with some trade-offs in different areas depending how we go and change the instructions. The other thing that we want to do in this is we want to stop and think methodically about what are the ways that it's going to be used that we want it to perform well in. And so we want to think about lots of different tasks or questions that the user might go and input, and we want to test them and check how it works. And so this is an opportunity for us to really start thinking about comprehensively, like, have we covered all of the cases? And then we want to go and think about what are unexpected things that the user might want to do. So later I'll talk about adversarial testing, but we also want to have what is going to happen if the user types in something totally unexpected. The user goes and says, generate an image of a car for me. Or the user says, predict the best stock for me to buy next week. What will happen? What will your GPT do? Will it do what you expect it to do? So you want to have both the anticipated use cases, but you also want to have edge use cases. Now, in software engineering, we've been doing this for a long time. Now, you have to do it and think about it if you're going to build some type of custom GPT and deploy it, because it's essentially a software tool that you're giving to other people. So you want to think about both the things that you expect, but you also want to think about the edge cases and the things that are totally unexpected as well, to make sure that A, your guardrails work correctly, there's not some type of unexpected loophole in your knowledge base or your instructions that create something that is problematic for you. So if you're going to create and deploy a real custom GPT that's going to be useful to a lot of people, you will benefit immensely if you stop and build yourself a benchmark of what you expect to do, what you expect it to do, examples of good output, how you would score output, because it's probably not yes or no, it's probably some nuance of what you're looking for in that output, and then the scores. And then you can go, and each time you make changes or updates to the custom GPT, you can run through this script and test it. There's also ways to automate this that I won't go through in this class, but you can also go and automate some of this. But the key is you want to be measuring the success of your custom GPT. Is it doing better on the things you care about? Is it regressing in anywhere? Is it handling the edge cases, applying its guardrails correctly? Thinking up great test cases obviously is going to be a challenge. You have to really think carefully about all the different dimensions. And sometimes as human beings, we don't do the best job of really thinking through all the different ways that somebody could interact with our system and all the different issues that could arise. And I've given you a number of different dimensions to think about when building test cases. Now, how are we going to overcome this problem? Well, one way that I can help you overcome this problem is I can show you how to build your own custom GPT to generate your test cases. In fact, this is a great way to get started with building a custom GPT because the risk is extremely low. We are trying to have it generate ideas for test cases that we can then use to test other GPTs. Now, if it doesn't do a great job, we'll look at it and say, hey, none of those are useful test cases to me. We can go and tweak it and try to improve it. But often what we'll see is it can generate really good and sort of thoughtful test cases for our domain. Now, how are we going to do this? How are we going to build a custom GPT? So I've started putting together a custom GPT. I've also included a document with all of the different sort of design considerations for test cases for custom GPTs. Now, there's lots and lots of additional design considerations you might want to consider for your particular domain, like compliance or regulatory or other things, but this is a good starting point. I've given it to you so you can go and tweak it and build your own custom GPT that is appropriate for your organization, your own custom GPT test case generator. So I've started one, the custom GPT test case generator, and here are my instructions. You're going to help the user generate test cases for their custom GPT. First, you will ask the user questions one at a time until you understand what their custom GPT is supposed to do. Once you have a reasonable understanding, progress to the next step. Second, you will read the provided document and generate 4 initial test cases for the user to consider based on a variety of dimensions. You will explain each test case. Each test case should be formatted as, I have title as a level 1 heading. You'll learn more about this in subsequent videos of how I'm doing this. Each test case should have a goal. Each one should explain what is being tested and why. Each one of them should have a user prompt, and I have some typos, which I'll fix as I go along here. We now have the prompt that the user would have typed in, and it's going to generate and think of the prompt. We're going to have what the correct answer should be, but we're going to tell it that the user needs to be told that they should edit or fill this part in. It might give you an initial starting point. And then we're going to have a rubric for grading the output that considers the different sort of dimensions of this test case and the purpose. Then what I've done is for the knowledge base, I have attached the document from your prior reading that describes all the dimensions of test cases and the types of things that we need to consider. And I've attached that as the knowledge base so it understands what we're trying to accomplish. What are the dimensions of the test cases that we need to consider to have the appropriate inspiration to go and build good test cases? And now let's go and take a look at our generator. So I'm going to switch over here. This is our custom GPT test case generator, and I'm going to say, please help me generate test cases for my custom GPT. So it starts off by saying, great, let's understand more about your custom GPT. This is a GPT to answer questions about the Vanderbilt travel and expense policy. And it's asking me a whole bunch of questions about what else might be going in. You think of appropriate answers given that this is a large university. Now, I could have gone in, and I probably should have gone and filled each one in, but for the purposes of this video, I'm letting it sort of infer what is appropriate based on what I've done. Now it's starting to generate test cases. Test 1, basic factual inquiry. What is the per diem rate for meals during university-funded travel? So it's giving me what the prompt would have been that the user typed in. The correct answer, it tells me I need to fill this in with the correct information from the Vanderbilt travel policy. Now notice I could have given it the travel policy actually and had it actually fill in correct answers for me, which would have been fantastic. And I should have thought of doing that. Maybe I'll do that in the future. And then the rubric, it's giving me the scoring rubric for this thing. Test case 2, procedural guidance. Test its ability to guide the user through a more complex procedural query, assessing both the completeness and step-by-step. How do I submit a travel expense report for attendance at a conference? And so this is a more sort of step-by-step. The answer may be spread out across multiple pages, something else, and so it has to be able to go and assess all this information and then provide it. Interpretive, can I get reimbursed for travel expenses if I decide to extend for my stay for personal reasons? Multi-turn interaction with clarifications. And then I can go in and say generate 4 more for me. So let's go and generate some additional test cases. Handling ambiguity. What should I do if my travel costs exceed the budget? So it's not clear what that means, and like we may have follow-up. Specific scenarios, and so it's keeping going, and I could just go and brainstorm with it over and over, or I could tailor it and I could say, no, I want test cases related to, potential issues related to compliance, or something that could have a safety related issue in it. And I want to make sure that there's not a problem with safety in what I'm recommending. Or something that could cause the user to spend a lot of money, and then it turns out that we can't reimburse for it at Vanderbilt, and that gets people upset. So let's try that one. What about test cases that involve the user potentially spending a lot of money that they can't get reimbursed for? So let's check that out. What might that look like? So it starts off with non-reimbursable expenses. Can I book a luxury hotel during my conference trip and get reimbursed? Well, there's a misunderstanding because you can't do a luxury hotel at all. That would be considered a problem. International conference, what should I know about booking business class flights? Providing all of these things that could be expensive that we want to test and make sure that we've really thought through, are we guarding our users against spending money that they can't get reimbursed for, which creates a financial burden on them, creates probably a lot of anxiety, unhappiness with the university, other things like that. So we could start tailoring our test cases and really thinking about them from a lot of different dimensions. We could also go and update our custom GPT so it outputs them as comma-separated values or in some structured format that we can import into like an Excel file that we're using to keep track of all this, or to import into some test case system where we track results. So not only can we use the generator to do sort of textual versions, but we could go and update the output formatting so that we can just output our test cases as something that we can pull into CSV, pull into Excel and track that way, or pull into some other tool, and we can make it easier for ourselves to do this. But this is a great way to get started about brainstorming and thinking through all the different ways that somebody might want to be able to go and use your system. But also you can go and sort of brainstorm with it what would be really adversarial things that somebody might do, and try to get a whole bunch of different ideas. Because the goal of this is to help you think more broadly about how somebody might use it, how they might mess up, what might be the potential problems or ambiguities, and really have a large exploration of your capabilities of your GPT.